Hello and welcome to Colin Bradley Artcast. I'm Stephen Bradley.
And I'm Colin Bradley.
Now, if you'd asked to do this podcast a day or so ago, I wouldn't have any voice. I've
Really?
just, uh, I've just today managed to get my voice back a little bit more. So we almost couldn't record this week because my voice has gone. Well, it's come back enough to do this podcast. So it might be that you do a lot of the talking this week, Dad.
No, that's all right. That's all right. I'm quite happy to do that. As long as mine don't go.
How have you been?
Had a good week. Yes, it's been a lovely week. It's lovely seeing you over the last weekend. That was nice, and the family. And yes, it's been nice. Good Easter, and it was. We had a food fair, which is an annual event in Broadstairs, just down the road from us, and that was very, very busy. I think people are getting back into the swing of things now, and it was as busy as I've ever known it, and it's a very popular place, and I mean you saw it, and it was. It's nice for things like that because we've got an ideal spot really here with our folk week, and we used to have Dickens week. Well, we still have Dickens week, not as much as we used to. It was not populated as much as it used to be when we first started here. But we've got different events going on, in the year. It makes it very interesting for us, So we always got something going on.
Yeah, you're in quite a nice little hub of lots of things happening. Generally, they'll happen down the end of your road because
That's right.
it's
Yeah.
quite a spot, and you're right near the beach anyway. So it's ideal for anything going on. But yeah, certainly feels like Broadstairs is starting to come alive a little bit more now as we head into spring and summer. So that's nice. So we do have a picture that you've started, you mentioned last week. So we've got a work in progress to see on that. But just before we do, we thought we'd check in on the discussion that we started last week that Ange brought up about pricing her work. So I said that we'd start a discussion on Facebook, which we did, and a few people have joined in on that discussion. And I think the biggest takeaway that we have from it is that everyone's struggling. There's no right answer. There's no person coming on saying, this is what I did, this worked for me. It seems to be just one of those things that is so hard to get right.
Absolutely, and I've always found that, Steve, ever since I started. When I first started out, I was in the similar situation. What do I charge? And I had no knowledge of any other artists at that time because I didn't belong to an art group. So I know how they feel, and I think I used to mention to my classes and the students when they used to ask that question, well, what I would do is make sure that you get the expenses back, on your framing and add a little bit on for material. You can't work on time. That's the one thing that you can't do. I think I've mentioned this before. You can't think, well, this has taken me 10 hours, so that's £5 an hour, that's £50. It doesn't work that way. You can't. You can do something and it take you a couple of hours and you can get a lot of money for it. It doesn't equate at all. So that's the one thing you can't do. You can't look and say, well, I've spent a week on this, so therefore I want what is equivalent to a week's money. It doesn't work like that. So you've got to look at art, and I think the only thing you can take away from it is use your neighbours, your friends, family, ask them, what if I was selling this to you, what would you be prepared to pay? And that give you a more honest answer than you would yourself, because you all undervalue your own work. So there isn't an obvious answer, I'm afraid.
And I think the other thing that crops up here and happens in lots of other creative fields is imposter syndrome. It's feeling like you're not an artist, or you're not worthy, or why me? Why should someone buy my work? You know, it's this imposter syndrome that is so hard to overcome as well, that comes with a lot of creative fields. We have it in theatre as well, you know. So it's a bit of a tricky formula to have. It's the imposter syndrome, the feeling of, you know, putting your heart and soul into something and wanting to be compensated and rewarded for that. And how do you put a price on that? So the discussion is going to continue. I appreciate, Ange, that, you know, we've talked a lot about it, but it's not necessarily been a formula. But I hope that through Facebook and future discussions on this podcast, we can talk about it and bring it up more, and discuss it. And obviously people, as they listen to this or join in on the discussion on Facebook, can weigh in with their thoughts and opinions and what pricing models work for them. And hopefully we can flesh out this discussion as time goes on, because I think it's a really valuable discussion. I think it's really important. So it's not the end of it, but we'll let the conversation carry on Facebook and bring it up on future podcasts as well.
That's a good idea.
Lovely. Excellent. Okay, so let's move on to your work in progress picture for this week. Let's put it up on screen now. It's looking amazing so far, Dad.
Yes, the cat, I was particularly impressed with the colours, and there's a lot more colour going into it than you actually see on that picture, because I'd only really started. I did manage to get the eyes in, which I first of all, I didn't think I was going to be able to make it, but I did. And I think it's important to get the eyes in, because without the eyes, I couldn't work on the background. I knew what background to put in. I was going to put the dark green background in, but it's the colours. And so when I got the eyes in, okay, then I used some of the colours that I'd used in the eye, and that was the starting point. And but I've advanced it a little more from what it is now, and it is coming along very, very well. And I'm very pleased with it. It's not going to be an easy one, because it's long fur again, and not only long fur, but lots and lots of colours. I can't tell you how many pencils I use, but there's a lot of them. And but it's I like it because people love cats, people love dogs, people love animals, let's face it. So I think this is going to be a popular one, purely from that point of view. It's not a full cat. I was planning on another one, but I changed my mind on that when I saw this. It was a more, it was a full portrait, you know, tail and all. But I decided against that one, because this one was so good. And of course, one of the advantages you've got when you're doing this kind of portrait, you can put the detail in. When you've got a bigger picture, you can't do that so much. You've got to rely, and you've got the important bit. You've got the head and the eyes and some of the fur. Whereas, you know, if you've got a whole portrait, then you've got a lot of repetitive fur, and you know, it just doesn't really hold for me. I mean, the giraffe last week was a totally different kettle of fish, because that was in a landscape, and that did look right. But even that, you can only get so much detail in the head, for instance. Whereas the one I did before the giraffe was more detailed, because it was only a head and shoulder. But I'm very pleased with it. Yeah, it's going to look good.
How are you finding getting that colouring? Because when you said about ginger cat, I don't know, I didn't realise it was kind of ginger tabby cat. You know, you've got you've got the almost ginger stripes in there. It's such a unique colouring. How are you finding approaching those different colours, different tones?
Well, I've done so many pictures, Steve, that I'm familiar with what colours goes with what colours, you know. So the only thing that I do sometimes have a little hesitancy with is when I'm using greys. Do I use the warm greys or do I use the cool greys? Well, this one had some warmer greys in it, and but more cooler greys. So I ended up using cooler greys in the end. But the only way I've substituted is the 175, which is an earth grey, and that is being used quite a lot. Not necessarily, I don't think in the section that you actually see on the screen, I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure I didn't use 175 there at all, but I have done subsequently. So I put that in. So, but the colours themselves, well, they just speak to you, really. You start off with a couple of colours, and then you think, oh, it would look nice if I did this. Then I did that. Can you put too much colour in? I think you probably could, yes. If you went over the top and looked at everyone and think, oh, I'm not sure what colour, so I'll put 5 in. That doesn't work like that. I think but this is experience, Steve. I mean, fortunately, people that do this cat and want to do the cat will have all the colours there. I've used a selection again. I tend to do that. I think mainly Faber again. It's always Faber. I don't always reach to Faber, I suppose, because I've been sort of brought up on Faber. I tend to favour them. Faber. And but there are others. There's something of everything there, but mostly Faber and some Caran d'Ache.
I know that orangey, gingery colour is quite a tricky tone to achieve, which is one of the reasons why you're doing this picture. How do you think people are going to find this? I know there's a lot of colours in this one, and I know that they're getting the colours and the tuition to go with it. But still, how difficult do you think people will find this one and achieving this particular colour tone?
Well, as you say, they're going to get the colours, or I'm going to give them the colours. If they haven't got the colours that I'm using, then go with the nearest you can in your own particular range you've got. There's no point in going and buying more when, especially these days, when money's a bit tight. So you can substitute, and I do say this as I'm doing the picture, but I can't really afford to say, oh, I'm going to stick to a limited amount, because then if you do that, you're not going to be able to get the tones that are so important, particularly, I say, with the Caran d'Ache. Now, if I bring Caran d'Ache into the equation, it's always because there's that brightness that Caran d'Ache bring to the table. Faber-Castell tend to be sort of normal, if you like. Cretacolor's very similar to Faber. They have the same kind of tonal range. When you get into Carbothello, they have a slightly brighter range. Some of their pencils are really nice and bright. But when you get to Caran d'Ache, well, then you really are going bright. I wouldn't be, well, I can, and I have done a picture with just Caran d'Ache, but I'd find that very restrictive, because sometimes you don't need all the bright colours. You know, the vibrancy of those colours are in your face, which is why I like it. But I like to add them. I'd always be mindful that I should tone it down a bit. And if you tone it down, you can't do that so easily with Caran d'Ache. So this is why I like the Faber, and then either Caran d'Ache added on and Cretacolor. Sometimes, I mean, Cretacolor's got a couple of colours which I use regularly, but and it's the same with Carbothello. But I would, if you took Faber away from me, I probably wouldn't carry on, because the Faber-Castell is like a standard, you know, like everything you reach for that, and it's always reliable. But you do need, and especially in a cat like this, you do need some brightness, and that's what you see more than ever in this particular picture, and you'll see it more as I go on. And the combination too of ochres, like 182, 175, mixed with some of the Caran d'Aches are quite remarkable. I don't think you see it too much in this particular instant. Perhaps on the top of the head a little, but I've gone mad now. I've gone, I've really gone. I'm starting to go into the thicker fur, and that's when I'm using. Probably people were quite surprised when they see what I'm actually using, the colours I'm actually using to create the effect.
Mm. And the background that you've done on this picture, this work in progress, is that the final background colour, or are you going to do more to that?
That's a good question. I'll tell you the colours I've used on that. I started with the 167 Faber. That's the first colour I put in, and the reason I did that is because that's in the eye. That's just sort of the green of the eye, the darker green of the eye. And then I used, when I put that in, it looked too bright, because the 167 is like a bluey green, and it clashed a bit with the area surrounding it. Now, so I needed something, coming back to what I was talking about with the Faber. 174 Faber toned it down. So that was the next colour that went in. Then I needed something darker. I used 165. So those are the three colours that go to make that up. But then I also, up in the corner, in here would be the top right-hand corner, as we look at it, I add a little black to it. But I don't know whether I've done it on that picture. I don't think I did. But I have subsequently reapplied some of the 167, which I've put on first of all. Just a little of that. And I may well bring that back in a little bit.
Interesting. Just to give a little bit of interest and a little bit of brightness.
That's right, because you've got to be careful, because there's a lot of fur seeping into this area. You can imagine, especially with whiskers and things. So you've got to be careful that you don't make too much of the background. This is why I think what I'm doing with that is going to look really good. It's going to be a backcloth for the picture and the brightness of the picture. It's already standing out quite well now, but it stands out even more once you start bringing the fur and the whiskers over the background, which is going to work very well because we've got the pastel mat.
Yes, of course it will. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's looking really good. This is already looking like it's going to be one of my favourite cat pictures you've done, in terms of the colouring of the fur, and I adore that green background. It reminds me of your very early work back in the day, you know, on the on-grey board, where you were, you know, doing quite sort of deep green backgrounds, which actually mirrors one of the original colour schemes of the gallery. It was very much of that theme. So I've got a fondness to that deep green that you've done there. I think it's a bit classic, and it's also reminiscent of that time. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what this one turns out like. Do you think you'll have it finished by next week?
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yes. I'm working my way down to the thicker fur now. I've got the head. I mean, you can't finish something like that off because you've got lots of whiskers coming in. So you have to anticipate those and knowing that they're going in. So you can't really see the full impact until those go in. When they do go in, there's a lot of them. Then that's the final. But so far, yes. Oh, yes, I'm on target. I'll have it done for next week, yeah.
Cracking. Well, I hope everyone likes this picture and is looking forward to seeing the finished one. We'll leave it there for this week. If you have any questions or anything you'd like us to discuss, then always get in touch with us via email or Facebook, and we'll mention it on this podcast. And as we do, these podcasts are for you. So if there is anything you want us to chat about, let us know. Lovely. Thank you, Dad. Thank you very much. Hopefully my voice will be fully returned by next week. But for now, we'll leave it there. So thank you, everyone, for watching and for listening. I'm Stephen Bradley.
And I'm Colin Bradley.
Enjoy your week.